So this first module is all about how to get help and who to get help from, and some of the kind of pitfalls with getting help. I think that getting help and getting help early on is really important. It's one of the reasons why I'm alive now. And I learned quite a bit about how you get help and kind of, yeah, I'm going to give you like my do's and don'ts, as it were. But a really important kind of attitude or mindset is that you can't do things one by one. With cancer, it just doesn't make sense to do something, wait, do something else, and wait. You know, I don't have time for that. And I guess maybe some of you don't either. So, you know, it's a really big struggle for me now. People have been contacting me from around the world. I run a Facebook group to help people access treatment in Japan and other advanced treatment in other countries. And people will say, oh, this sounds great. I will come back to it if my treatment doesn't work out, or oh, I'd like to talk to an immunotherapist when my chemo stops working. That's not a strategy that results in a long, happy, healthy life when you have cancer. I know that oncologists very, very, very strongly encourage patients to do first-line treatment and second-line treatment and third-line treatment and fourth-line treatment. But that's not scientific. That's an economic thing. That's not science. It's to do with, yeah, money. And we need to kind of get around that somehow. And I've done that by getting a lot of help from various people, finding out how to access specialists directly. I've done crowdfunding to pay for my treatment. If you have private health insurance, then that may be a route. If you're in a country with universal healthcare, where it's free at the point of access, there are still various ways that you can get off standard care, because, you know, realistically, standard care does not have a happy ending as far as cancer is concerned with the majority of cancers, right? That's the reality we're dealing with. When I looked into the cancer I was diagnosed with, which was stage 4 colon cancer, spread to the abdominal membrane, realistic survival 7 to 9 months, almost no outliers. So there were very few of the kind of amazing cases where someone's alive 5 years later. So I think 5-year survival in 2016 for my cancer was around like 0.1%, right? Which is essentially zero, right? That's the margin of error. So it was no good for me to like just go along with the oncologist step by step, getting through stuff. I had to, shortcut it, work around the system, work through the system. And that's what I did. And that's what I'm going to share with you now. So looking at like 6 general groups that could help us. And I'm going to talk about like very kind of boring, mundane stuff, because I know some people watching this, and maybe some of you on this call, have just recently been diagnosed and dealing with chemotherapy and surgery and other treatments for the very first time. So first group of people that could obviously help us are friends and family. And there are obviously issues with this, because sometimes you get offers of help that are kind of hollow, that don't result in anything. Sometimes people want to help, but the help they're offering isn't particularly relevant or helpful to you. Sometimes people want to help and just don't really know what to do. I found that asking for specific things makes your chance of success much, much, much higher. So if someone contacts you, friend or family, and says, "Oh, I heard about your cancer. Is there anything I can do?" Think of something small they could do quickly, like come with you to your next chemo appointment, or pick you up after you've had a consultation with an oncologist or something like that. Just do some shopping for you or that kind of thing. So that way you very quickly find out who is kind of genuine and useful and who isn't. I've personally found I have to kind of not judge my friends and family at all. People have stuff going on in their own lives. That doesn't stop just because I have cancer. Some people just aren't very good at getting things done. I found very early on that my friends and family didn't magically become competent and knowledgeable and skillful just because I'm in a horrifically bad situation and need some competent, skillful, knowledgeable people around me. That just didn't happen. That's not like there's no kind of magic thing where everyone around you suddenly becomes super smart and ace efficient. An obvious thing friends and family can help you with is crowdfunding. Later module is all about crowdfunding. It's made a massive difference to me doing crowdfunding because it's paid for my treatment that's not covered through the public health system. So here in Japan, my kind of basic treatment is covered by public insurance, but although I have to contribute 30%, but all the cutting edge stuff, immunotherapy and proton beam therapy, that was not covered by insurance. So I've crowdfunded that, and that's, yeah, made a big difference to me being access to those treatments. So next section of people, maybe online. There are lots of online groups out there, Facebook groups. There are many. There are kind of general cancer ones. There are groups for cancer carers. There are groups for very specific diagnoses. So I'm in a group called Stage 4 colon cancer. That is, I think, like 95% are Stage 4 colon cancer patients and about 5% are carers. And the group has been incredibly useful. About 5,000 members. They're spread all over the world. It's really useful to be in groups where there's patients in other countries because they may have access to treatments that you've never heard of or you're not being told about by your oncologist. So that's really helpful to be able to just hear of those treatments. I think it's also useful to be in some online groups that are not related to your cancer, so some general cancer groups maybe, because increasingly we're seeing cancer treatments for one type of cancer being used successfully to treat other types of cancer, maybe with modifying the protocol, or maybe just using it in exactly the same way. And there's now just trials showing that, you know, this drug can be used for another type of cancer. And also in the last few years, we've seen more combination treatments coming. So things like for people like me who probably wouldn't do well with a checkpoint inhibitor immunotherapy because I'm MSI low, microsatellite instability low, which means the cancer cells aren't particularly mutated. There are trials going on for using checkpoint inhibitors plus another drug or another two drugs to get them to work for patients who usually wouldn't get a good response. So for example, checkpoint inhibitor plus MEK inhibitor. MEK inhibitor is or MEK inhibitor is another type of targeted therapy. So it's really important to hear about this stuff so that we can talk to our oncologists and other specialists about that. One thing you want to watch out for with online groups, particularly the Facebook ones, is there are a lot of scammers in those groups. There are a lot of people with kind of agendas that, people that don't necessarily have your best interests at heart. And it's important to identify those people early on and block them, because it's not fun if you're posting questions in a group about a drug or a treatment or side effects you're dealing with, and you're getting people messaging you because they've seen you in the group and they're messaging you trying to sell you supplements or some kind of tea or some kind of potion or whatever. So that's something you need to watch out for. I'm told that the groups for women's cancers tend to be less friendly than other groups. I have several friends with breast cancer, and there's some very toxic people in those groups for some reason. I'm not really sure why that is, but you do want to watch out for that. I also find a problem in some of the groups is the kind of the toxic positivity. I've got to this point by being negative and cynical and very skeptical and studying a lot. But sometimes in the groups, when you maybe post something about a struggle, you'll get sort of a shower of messages about, looking on the bright side and everything happens for a reason and this kind of thing. And that can be, quite frustrating when you're dealing with a brutal chemotherapy regime or something like that. And obviously, it should go without saying that a lot of the people in the groups are just giving wrong information, maybe well-intentioned, but wrong information. Medical stuff is complicated. Some people write things that are very well-meaning, but just dumb. I had a problem when I was going to do a big surgery. I wanted an epidural, so that's where you have anesthetic injected into your spine. It's abdominal surgery, so this was surgery for my intestines. I wanted the epidural, but my platelet count was low and had been for a long, long time. And I was trying to find out about ways that would work to increase the platelet count. And people gave some very, very strange answers like, oh, the day before your blood test, eat lots of red meat and that will, boost your platelet count. It doesn't, it wouldn't. And even if it did, it would be very, very dangerous to, if you could somehow force your platelet count up for the blood test, get approved for a potentially life-threatening procedure, and then go into surgery and have this thing. The reason that it's so dangerous is if your platelets are low when you have an epidural, you can get like a fluid buildup in the base of the spine, and potentially fatal. So lots of dumb information out there, lots of people misunderstanding stuff. So although online groups are incredibly valuable, you do have to be a bit careful. Non-profit organizations and charities often have their own online forums as well. I have generally found these are less useful than the Facebook group ones because they're typically much smaller. And I just find them less informative. However, they do tend to be like moderated or at least monitored a lot. So it's kind of maybe a safer, more pleasant environment. So next, another group who can help you are charities and non-profits. it's worth contacting the charity and non-profits in your country and seeing what they can offer you. So a lot can give advice, some can introduce you to non-medical specialists, so things like counselors, things like kind of financial people who specialize in helping out cancer patients. Charities and non-profits may even be able to help with your financial situation, or at least give you advice about what to do. There's a charity in the UK called Macmillan that they're kind of well known for putting chemotherapy nurses, or they have these things called, these people, Macmillan nurses, who are nurses who have been through extra training in various skills related to caring for cancer patients. And Macmillan is a great charity to get to know, because on the website there are lots of downloadable guides for different cancers and also cancer related issues. So they have guides for how to talk to children about cancer. They have guides for dealing with financial issues. They have guides about very specific types of cancer. They have treatment guides, and they'll send you printed ones. I've got, I don't know if you can, this is the chroma key, you might not see this very well, but Understanding Colon Cancer, so Macmillan guide. So if you're in the UK, they will send you printed copies. It's really worth getting a printed copy of a guide, because then you can take it to your medical appointment, and you can sort of show it to the doctor and say, this guide says this treatment might be an option for me, please look into it. Another group of people who can help you are drug companies. Now, this is a kind of a weird one, but potentially very, 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 very powerful. So pharmaceutical companies can give you drugs for free. This is often called like compassionate access. It's really worth looking into. If there's a drug that is not available in your country because it hasn't been approved yet, but if it has been approved in other countries, you know, it's safe. It hasn't been approved in your country, maybe for financial reasons. If it's potentially a good option for you, it's worth talking to drug companies about compassionate access to that drug. Drug companies will often do what's called post-marketing surveillance. So this is when a drug has been approved, so it's gone through 3 phases of clinical trials, and they want to kind of just keep a watch, do more research on just how effective it is, and how patients are tolerating the drug. So it's sometimes possible, when you've kind of missed out on a trial or been rejected for a trial, you could get into a post-marketing surveillance trial, or this sort of the case study of one, where essentially it's like a trial of one, it's just you. So it's worth looking into that. So if you hear of a drug, let's say you hear of a drug in a Facebook group and you think, oh, this seems to fit my situation, you can just look it up online, just Google it or look in Wikipedia, find out the commercial names. So drugs have generic names and then commercial names. Find out the generic names and which drug companies are making it, and then you can contact them directly through the website, send some emails, and you may get access for free to cutting edge drugs that are not available in your country yet. So that can be a very, very significant thing. Number 5, so medical professionals, they're obviously the main people that we should be getting help from. If you are actually, so just in the chat, if you could just type UK if you're based in the UK, just because there are some specific things to say about that. But in some countries, it's very difficult to access specialists directly. So for example, the UK, where I'm from, we get to talk to the oncologist usually, and it's difficult to actually access a specialist directly. This is a very, 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 very serious problem, because you need to talk to the specialist directly. Right? If you get one thing out of this session, one thing out of this video, you need to talk to the specialist directly. It's no good to be communicating with them via an oncologist, because too much information gets lost in translation, right? So in the UK, what happens at hospital is once a week or a couple of times a week, there are meetings to discuss the serious medical cases in the hospital. So this is the MDT meeting, like multidisciplinary team meeting, where a group of specialists meet together. So let's say it's a big hospital and there's an MDT meeting for the GI section. So they're discussing like the colon cancer cases and gastric cancer and this kind of thing. And there's oncologists, there'll be maybe radiographers who talk about scans, radiologists who talk about using radiotherapy. There'll be a pharmacist, maybe a colorectal nurse or other specialist nurses. A whole bunch of people in this meeting discussing these cases. And your case may get a few minutes. And the problem is, if the oncologist says, my patient Matthew has asked me about, can he have cryotherapy for a lung tumor spread from his colon cancer? And maybe there's a specialist there, and they'll give maybe a detailed answer of why then they won't do it. But I wouldn't hear that detailed answer usually, or I'd only hear part of it, because my oncologist would say, sorry, the cryogenic specialist said, no cryotherapy for you, it's too dangerous. Or it's not expected to have a good result. Now, that's not very useful for me, because it doesn't give me any chance to find out why. It could be that the cryotherapy would have worked really well for the lung tumor, but because I've got, let's say, some lymph nodes that are still cancerous, the specialist doesn't think it's worth doing. Well, if I know that's the reason, then I could go and talk to someone else about treating those lymph nodes with radiotherapy, or I could try changing to a more unpleasant chemo regime. Depending on the position of the lymph nodes, I could even go for surgery. So it's really important to get direct access to specialists. And I found that the more you know about cancer, the more you know about the nomenclature. There's all these names you're dealing with, all these technical points. The more you know about that, the better the conversations go with the oncologists and with the specialists. So I think it's really, it's really important to educate yourself, and that's why I'm so glad we've got so many people joining these sessions. A similar kind of thing applies for getting clinical trials. You say to your oncologist, are there any trials that would be applicable? And maybe they do a quick search in the database and they say no, and they don't say why, or they don't give enough detail about why. You need to find out the specifics, and then you could contact some teaching hospitals that are doing trials. You could post in some Facebook groups about your situation and see if anyone is in a trial for that. It's quite surprising. You can do trials in other countries. They're often a lot of, not exactly restrictions, but there are a bunch of logistical issues to join a clinical trial in another country. But many countries will take you for the clinical trials. There's a lot of issue with like the follow-up, because of course they want to be monitoring you for 3 years essentially. So you have to have like very cooperative oncologist who promises to send your CT scans every 3 months for 3 years or whatever, blood test results to the hospital in the US or elsewhere in Europe or whatever. But yeah, international patients can and do join clinical trials. So it's really worth looking into that. Here in Japan, there aren't many clinical trials, and they're usually like safety trials. So when a drug has been approved in another country and proven effective, the Japanese universities or some of the bigger Japanese hospitals will run trials just to make sure it's really, really safe before using it in Japan. So yeah, I'm doing a whole module on trials, but I will give my very, very strong opinion that getting into trials early on can be a very, very viable way of turning around this really bad situation of having cancer, because yeah, there are a lot of trials happening now. So there's like a big wave of trials happening now. Many of these were ones arranged for kind of a couple of years ago, and because of COVID, things sort of were all put on hold, but there are lots of trials happening now. It is worth getting in them. Particularly, I'd say, again, I can't give a medical opinion, but the combination trials, I would always look for those over the monotherapy where like a single drug is being used. Really important to get early access to trials, because the longer you leave it, the less chance you have of getting in the trial, right? You may be rejected because of the level of cancer, right? You may get rejected because you've had other treatments that somehow conflict with that trial. So a whole bunch of drug trials you can't have if you've had surgery, because they're doing a trial to see an alternative for surgery. A whole bunch of combination trials, you're rejected if you've had one of the drugs in the combination, right? Because they need to get good quality data for their trial. So yeah, leaving it late is not a good idea. And then yeah, last group I will briefly mention is the media. I know in the UK this is particularly effective. Yeah, getting into the media can help a lot with crowdfunding. It can help a lot with the compassionate access I mentioned, where, you know, if you, I mean, just get into local media, just kind of tell your story to the local newspaper, local radio, and then when you get into the media, you get then going to include that when you send your emails to the drug companies. If you've sent emails to drug companies and not had any success, again, media can help you out. The key thing with the media, they will help you as much as you need, but you have to give them something newsworthy, give them a story, find an angle for it. You know, meet them kind of halfway, like you've got to give them something newsworthy. I personally think every cancer case is newsworthy. It's a very serious thing we're dealing with. But the media needs some kind of angle. So, you know, it could be that your friends are doing some crowdfunding for you. It could, you know, could just be that you're an avid swimmer, right? Avid swimmer battling cancer, desperate for early access to new cancer drug, right? That's a headline that a local newspaper can use. So give them something newsworthy. Yeah, so I've covered like 6 groups that can help you. So friends and family, online groups, charities and nonprofits, drug companies, medical professionals, and media. I'm doing some notes for this module. So I'll make PDF notes available for you, which you can print out, and also some checklists. So every module will have notes and a checklist that you can print out. And I'm going to now go to questions.